I'm Phil Long, Regional Agronomist here with Liqui-Grow.
Hi, I'm Ashley, Seed and Seed Treatment Manager here with Liqui-Grow. Today, Phil and I are out here walking some fields, looking at the environmental chaos that we seem to be having this spring of 2026. Never-ending rain, lots of moisture.
Different. Yep.
It is. Yep. So, Phil, give us a little rundown of what this year looks like. We're headed into an El Nino. We've kind of been talking about this for a couple years now, and it seems the El Nino's here. What are we going to expect going into the summer season and then leading into the fall?
You're setting this up like I'm a weatherman, and I am not. But if I had to, the super El Nino or whatever they're talking about, should set us up to be, hot and dry, which actually in a lot of cases, not to scare people, but might mean a rust situation. But from what I'm hearing, that's going to be later in the season. So we need to focus on maybe the conditions closer to home, essentially right off the coast. And it looks like we're kind of remaining in this somewhat stormy pattern, moderate, to above average temperatures, which in essence sets us up for a pretty good disease potential for the ones that we commonly see, I should say, not the rusts and so forth, because the severe weather, brings all of that inoculum from the residue below up into the canopy. Splashing, blowing winds, all these things that we've been having really encourages that kind of spread, I'll say.
So it really makes the plant a lot more susceptible to some of these diseases that we're used to seeing. And any of those diseases that have the opportunity to overwinter in that residue are very easily going to make it back into this year's crop.
Yeah, and I think that's the first point to make in 2026. Obviously this is economically a tough year. So if you're making this consideration, maybe field by field or such, keep that in mind. So corn on cornfields, the highest potential or environmental conditions would be corn on cornfields, no-till situations, anything with more residue that could harbor that inoculum from a year or 2 years ago, manured fields, whatever it is, those things that can potentially give you more disease. The more clean tilled it is, the lower your chances are. Burying, obviously, the inoculum reduces that chance. But remember, if you have those fields that are in those situations, you need to be paying close attention, scouting, or just planning ahead with a fungicide.
Sure. So first thing to look for is the residue, your tillage practice. And then in addition to what Phil's saying with that is check your hybrid ratings. So internally at Liqui-Grow, we do have our own internal response to fungicide ratings, and that's on our website. If you go to liquigrow.com, under the seed drop-down button, you will have a response to fungicide guide in there that we have internally created to let you know how those hybrids respond to a fungicide and if that will help you with your ROI. So that's good to know, is kind of watch your hybrids and where you place them. If it was on a no-till situation with something that's susceptible to diseases, might be a better idea to put a fungicide on that field over
That's
something
an excellent
else.
point, Ashley. And when I was in seed, I used to always say you kind of had maybe two groups when it comes to tolerance to fungal or pathogens. And we have the racehorse kind of category, high yield, high potential, and maybe more of an agronomic, a stronger agronomic hybrid, if I can say the word. And that essentially, that should be your focus if you're looking at whether or not to apply a fungicide, because there's a lot of university research out there that will show that strong ROI on fungicides on those hybrids that are more susceptible to gray leaf spot, northern corn, the common ones that we get. If you have a hybrid that's really tolerant to it, a lot of times it doesn't show the ROI as much if we have less disease pressure year. So the hybrid susceptibility is actually probably one of the biggest factors you could pay attention to make that decision. It's not always fun because, like it said, it's a little more field by field, but that really truly is one of the deciding factors when it comes to your ROI on a fungicide.
And in a year where things might be a little bit tighter on the budget, that's certainly something you could look at if you had to weigh your options. That's definitely a direction to help sway you one way or another if you had to.
And we always talk about the strobilurins, add that added health benefit. So if you're trying to get the top potential on all your hybrids, then the fungicide is going to help you get there. A lot of our premium top quality products have 3 modes of action with that strobilurin in there, and that's going to help you get that added, stay green late season. So remember that too. But if you're trying to pay really close attention and manage, financials this year, that hybrid susceptibility is is the top one you should be looking at. So hopefully you have your hybrid maps out there too, and you know where all your hybrids are.
Yes. So in addition to your tillage and your hybrid selection, if we go out there, V10, V14 time range, and what are we scouting for? If we're seeing the disease, what's our next steps? Kind of what are we looking for in that time range?
Yeah, we've been kind of used to the last couple of years, had maybe higher disease potential on certain diseases, but we need to remember we still got to scout. You still got to scout, and because that also helps you make sure that you selected the right, fungicide and so forth to curb that disease or help whatnot with that disease. So going out there right before tassel is key. A lot of the cutoffs, or I'll say the decision-making point, is looking at the third leaf below the ear. So looking down in the lower canopy and seeing if you have disease lesions on there. So whether that's northern corn leaf blight or gray leaf spot, seeing if you have diseases on that third leaf below the ear. So typically they say 50% on a lot of those economic decision-making tools. If you have on the third leaf below the ear, if you have lesions showing up on 50% of the plants, that's kind of your indication, okay, we probably should be spraying.
Sure.
Because the second part of this is, well, we sometimes talk about the latent period. And this is important. I talk about a lot. Maybe it's boring, I don't know. But it's important because say you have some gray leaf spot lesions on that third leaf below the ear. Oh, no big deal. We're about at VT. We don't have that far to go. Well, the latent period on something like gray leaf spot is 2 to 3 weeks.
So that latent period is once you've seen it, the disease has already been in that plant, and we just couldn't see it for about 3 weeks. So it's taking over.
Yeah, so there's a lot of lesions there that haven't shown up yet. So if you see some lesions down there, and the latent period on gray leaf spot or tar spot, we talk a lot about that, is 2 to 3 weeks. So that means it takes 2 to 3 weeks for the disease that's already infected that plant to show symptomology on the plant.
So we're almost late.
In 2 to 3 weeks, it's going to might be massively more than what you're seeing on that lower canopy. And that's the key in understanding that latent period is, okay, I'm sitting here at tassel and I see disease. And that's why they say, look at that third leaf below the ear, 50% of the plants, because in 2 to 3 weeks, that could be substantially more. So yeah, that's important to understand. Like I said, 2 to 3 weeks, northern corn leaf blight's around 2 weeks. Some of them are 10 days to 14 days, but that's still 10 to 14 days. You're waiting. So you need to go back out there and understand, okay, I am seeing significantly more symptomology, lesions on these leaves. The environment's right. So obviously we need to make a decision sooner rather than later.
So the environment, like you said, especially with this El Nino, it's probably going to be a wetter summer, maybe drier fall is kind of what they're talking. Really making it more susceptible earlier in the season. So scouting, taking us back to the basics. Don't forget to go out there, get to the basics, check your fields.
You got to scout, and they don't, I'm not a weatherman, but if it would turn off hot and dry, it could change the potential for the diseases we have. But right now it's, not necessarily the case. And, the severe weather, I always think of severe weather, high winds, damaging winds, bending corn over, things like that. It's easy to spread that inoculum on those plants when we got driving, pounding rains. The other thing is, usually what we talk about with severe weather is bacterial diseases. We don't always have a ton of those. Physoderma is one that we see quite a bit. But some of the other bacterial diseases can also get in there, as well as stalk rot. So don't forget that. You're also applying a fungicide that could be potentially helping later season reduce some of that, keep that plant healthy longer, and reduce some of that stalk lodging late season too.
Sure. So Phil, I'm going to kind of throw a curveball at you here. A big talking point last year that everyone was discussing was southern rust. Do we expect to see southern rust? Have you heard anything from your standpoint? Is it here? Does it overwinter? Kind of what's your thoughts leading into this summer? Do we expect to see that again?
It's a good thought to recap that. And so, no, I mean, I said it last year, not that I was trying to be a forecaster or anything, but, we had it a couple years in a row, but I don't see that potential coming to fruition. It comes up from the south, and we typically have fronts that do that. But the key is it doesn't overwinter here, like you said. There's a lot of factors that go into this that I don't want to get too far into, but it has to overwinter on corn, it has to be brought up on those fronts, and then we have to have those conditions favorable. We had it early. It was brought up on a front early the last couple of years, and right now we don't have that. So typically what happens with any of our rusts is they come up later,
Sure.
and we might see southern rust at R3, R4,
Right.
starting out, ending up in the canopy. Well, it's not a big deal at that point. It's a big deal when it shows up at tassel or before, like it did the last couple of years in early to mid-July, and we're starting to see rust. That's a problem because rust spreads really rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I don't want to get everybody concerned about southern rust.
The conditions we've had are not favorable to rust this year. We're not
Super El
promising,
Nino
but-
might indicate that could be the case, but like I said, most people are saying
Sure.
that's later in the fall. So I'm not as concerned about that.
Okay. Well, good. We'll
Yeah.
keep an eye out for it. We're definitely going to be walking fields here later today, checking some things out, see what we've got going. But we appreciate you guys tuning in, and talk with your agronomy field advisor for that response to fungicide guide that we have on our website.
Thanks for watching.
Lead Academy.
Liqui-Grow
Excellence
and agronomy development.